going on to Caravan to Midnight for the very first time, and it is my understanding that while they have individually gone on to some radio programs and so forth, this is the first time that they've gotten together as a family and come on to a televised production. And it is my privilege and pleasure to introduce to you the wife of the late Robert Lavoie Finicum, Mrs. Jeanette Finicum, Thara Tenney, it's the oldest child in the family, Brittany Beck, the middle child, and Robert Finicum, the oldest son. Welcome, Finicum family. It's great to have you with us. We are honored and, in as much as we can be, delighted to have you with us. I just wish that the circumstances had been a little different, but welcome in any case. Glad to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. We appreciate having our family on so that we have the opportunity to talk about our father and husband.
You know, I realize the gravity of the situation that has brought us together here, and so I don't want to say anything that will inflame an already emotional situation. But I got to tell you, I was shocked and sickened as I watched what happened to Lavoie. I could not believe what I was watching, and yet the other part of me went, yeah, I can completely believe it, because this is the point that we have come to in this country. This was so. Did I think that he handled everything exactly right? Well, no, because that wasn't a scripted event at all. I mean, he was under pressure, but I found that there was absolutely no excuse for that to have happened other than just a brutal demonstration of brute force. So, Jeanette, if you'd like to, it would be our pleasure to just have you get us rolling here with our conversation. So I turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, again, I want to say thank you so very much for having us on and for sharing your audience with us so that we have a place where we can have our message heard. And our message really is about letting the public know the truth about what happened, the truth about my husband and who he was as a husband and a father and a man of God, and what his reasons were for being in Oregon. And so I really appreciate this opportunity to do just that. I wanted to start by describing my husband and how I saw him and who I felt that he was. He was a man who was very disciplined. He was a man of character, of principle. He had integrity. He had an enormous amount of strength. He was a man who was consistent, and again, he was disciplined, and he was so in every area of his life. And he began this discipline and structure early on in his life. He was one that read daily from the scriptures. So he developed a spirituality. He developed a relationship with his God. He was a man who exercised every day. And so that was another way he was consistent. So he kept his body in good shape. He was a man who studied and looked to great men for answers to questions, and read from many, many books. And I have a stack of books in which he was currently reading from. And some of them were, of course, he carried the pocket Constitution everywhere he went. He was reading from the scriptures, the Holy Bible, and from our Book of Mormon. But he also was reading books like Samuel Adams, Stand Up for Freedom by Ezra Taft Benson, the American Constitution. He read from Mark Levin, Liberty and Tyranny, A Witness and a Warning, again from President Benson, Bonhoeffer, or David Barton's Original Intent. These are just a few. These are the ones that he was in currently. However, he read feverishly all the time. He's always had his face in a book, and that began many years ago, but in the venue of searching out more answers to the state in which our country, what he was realizing our country was in, he started to read more political books and to try to understand the direction in which our country had taken.
Did you get a sense of why did this become such a focus of his interest?
Well, he just started to realize that the Constitution was being violated in every way, and that our rights were disappearing, our liberties were gone. And this was about 8 years ago, he started to realize that, and that's when he really started to pick up many different types of books to try to really understand about the Constitution and to really know what it meant and what it was saying, and so that he could speak from a place of knowledge. And unfortunately, I did not put in that daily diligence that he did. And so I have a lot of catch-up work to do. You know, my husband was the one that went out and spoke and shared and taught because he had those talents. And our family is determined to move forward with his mission in teaching about the Constitution, about liberty, about freedom, the freedoms lost, and what we as individuals can do to stand up and take that mantle and move forward and help teaching and awakening Americans to the awful state in which we're in, so that they too, in their own spheres, can pick up the torch and move forward in bringing back our liberties. We can do this. And when I say that, when we say fight for our liberties, we don't necessarily mean picking up a gun and fighting in that sense. We all have different talents and we all have different abilities, and our freedoms can be fought for in different ways. And I believe that our family's mission is to fight to educate the general public in reference to the Constitution, understanding it, and in other areas in which I believe that we can discuss.
Yeah.
I believe that, it was John Adams who said, in the Constitution, there's a quote from him. It says, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." And our dad was a walking testament of this. He not only was competent, but he was virtuous. You have to have both. You have to have competence and you have to have virtue to perpetuate freedom. And this is the legacy that our dad lived.
I want to comment on that virtue. My husband had not only public and political virtue, but he also had personal virtue. And I believe we all have to have all three. We have to be personally virtuous and in the public and in the politics of today. We need to have that virtue and that understanding of that.
You know, I am so indignant against so much of the stuff that this government is pulling that I'm very vocal about this, almost to the point of sounding pretty radical. It just makes me angry when I see this sort of thing. It's sort of like I saw this guy shaking a child one time. He outweighed me by 150 pounds, but I told him something bad was going to happen if he didn't stop shaking his son like that. I asked him, "What's the matter with you? Are you trying to break his neck? Calm down, or something really bad is going to happen right here." Of course, it would have to have been the power of the Lord Himself that would have enabled me to do anything. But that's how I feel. That's just the beginning. That when I see all of this stuff that's going on, from the undeclared wars to the racial division to the leaning on ranchers like the Finicums and like the Hammonds and like the Bundys, it just makes me nuts. And then when you look back there and see who's behind it, guys like Filthy Harry Reid and others, my words, not yours. I just think to myself, really, the rats have taken over the ship, and you got the people. We should be kicking the rats off the ship, but as it is, the rats have taken over the ship, and the people are going to the lifeboats trying to get off of it. But unfortunately, there's nothing but ocean out there. We have to remain on the ship. We're not going to make it if we leave the ship. So, Robert, are you Robert Jr., sir?
Yeah. Family calls me Tell, but yeah, I'm Robert. So Lavoie's son.
Yeah. Well, I just wonder if Junior was your suffix. You could have been a second or a third. I didn't know. I didn't want to call it wrong, you know?
No. I mean, it is the third. Robert's kind of a family name, but it's also kind of a family tradition to not go by Robert. So
Okay, gotcha. Because too many people say what at the same time, right?
That's right.
Were you all as the son and now you have other brothers, right?
yes.
Okay. So did the sons and daughters of Robert Senior and Jeanette, were you schooled in constitutionalism? I mean, all along. Was your dad always talking about this stuff?
I think that it was always important, but not so passionate about it as it was in the last 5 to 8 years. And then it became more of his mission. And I wouldn't say that it was mostly Dad's mission. And we listened, we agreed with so many things, but we didn't really carry that flag in the same way that he did.
Understood. So let me ask you this. Now, anybody can jump in with anything, add, embellish, amplify, whatever you wish. And I repeat, you are completely at liberty. If you got something to say, now's the time and place to say it. And so why don't we just go here? What took him to Oregon? Why did he go there?
Can I jump in on this one?
Yeah.
I think that's a big question that most people don't really know. When you read in mainstream media, what did all the headlines say? It said militants take over National Refuge or something along those lines, and that they were tagged as anti-federal government. And I mean, nothing could be further from the truth. Dad actually loved the federal government, saw it as a constitutional entity, but what he was against was government overreach. And it went back to the Constitution. Article 1, Section 8 says federal government should not possess more than 10 miles square of land. That's the size of Washington, D.C., 100 square miles, so 10 miles by 10 miles. And so looking at the BLM owning the majority of the western United States, he saw that as an overreach of federal government. And so his sole purpose was to protest that, not to disparage the federal government, not to say that, we need anarchy, but more of let's have states or local governments take that proper role in maintaining the land and have it be not in the federal government's control, because it's not really part of what their scope of government should be. And that was the whole reason for it.
And he had to do his own studying to discover the true principles of liberty, just like Mom had illustrated in the beginning, his big stack of books that he would be reading and that he had read. And he had to discover how these bureaucracies was an overreach of government. And his learning journey is much like my learning journey or Brittany's or Tell's or anybody's learning journey. It's line upon line, here a little, there a little. And once he gained that insight, he looked within himself and he had to make some decisions. He had to say, I either need to shut my mouth and stop talking, or I need to remain true to these principles that I know to be correct. And so that's when he had to draw that firm line in the sand. And he announced publicly on the Brian Hyde radio show in Cedar City, Utah, that he was canceling or no longer recognizing the Bureau of Land Management as the managers of his ranch. And once he was able to make that decision for himself, in recognizing that he had to honor his own personal property rights, he would then look for other people who were in the same situation as he was and see how he might help that person learn how to defend their personal property rights. Because again, it is a journey, line upon line, here a little, there a little. And when you're dealing with a big, abusive, tyrannical government who has a perverted lust for power, the odds are against you. And so us liberty-loving, principled people need to rally together in our stand in defending our property rights. And so when he became aware of the Hammond story in Oregon, he was disgusted, and he was documenting his journey of canceling the BLM all on YouTube so that the public could see. And he made a video on his YouTube channel. If anybody wants to go to that channel, it's Lavoy Finicum YouTube channel. That's what it's called, and it's titled
"By Dang I'm Mad."
By Dang I'm Mad. And in that video is where he describes his disgust with our federal government, how it had been terrorizing this particular family. Now, this family is not the only family who has suffered the despotism of our federal government. There is the Bundy family in Nevada. There is the Hammond family in Oregon. There is the Hages family. I'm not sure where they're from, but they had been terrorized for years. And he understood, after drawing that firm line in the sand for himself, that it was his civic duty to help these people defend their property rights. Now, if you want to be religious about it, the first great commandment says, love thy God with all thy heart, might, mind, and soul. And then the second great commandment is like unto the first. It says, love thy neighbor as thyself. If you want to look at it in a secular way, the Declaration of Independence says that all men are created equal, and that we need to, we have unalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is the byproduct of our use of personal property. So Dad's decision to go to Oregon was not just political, but it was religious. He knew that he had to love his neighbor. He had to provide them that support against this terrorism that they were receiving. And his example, his courage, his fortitude is something that is lacking in the men of this nation. And I believe that his being murdered while his hands were in the air, being willing to go and make that sacrifice, put it all on the altar, is what is waking up so many people who are in a sickening sleep. And so that is another very intimate reason why he found himself in Oregon.
Yeah, I know. I saw an article and I read it with great disgust that was clearly visible to anybody who was watching or even listening. And there was a picture of Mr. Finicum sitting, looked like he was at a campsite, had his rifle across his knees, and he was in a kind of a pensive state. And whoever this was, this left-leaning, whatever, I might say otherwise, but I'm in polite company now. Puke, that's it. I had titled his article, Death of a Would-Be Tyrant. And I deconstructed this article as best I could, because it was clearly, this is what I call troll journalism. Just laying it out there. Tyrant, really? Death of a would-be tyrant? I mean, I don't mean to get you, I don't mean to get you jacked up, but I'm a little jacked up myself about this. And you know, I think we all know that mainstream media is bought and paid for, and I think we also know that they were complicit in covering up everything from Building 7 that nobody seems to know about except the select few here in Caravan Land and in other places. There were 2 towers that came down on 9/11/2001. There were 3 buildings that came down, and they're clearly, in my mind settled, it's controlled demolition. But what happened? Mainstream media just goes right along with the official narrative. BBC threw up Building 7's collapsed, and then, they lose their transmission because the building is still standing behind them, behind the reporter, and then they come back about an hour later and go, yeah, it's definitely down, we're going to carry on with the report, we've reestablished contact, and then the building was down. It's just so incredibly stupid. And you talking about there seems to be just a short supply of integrity, character, and guts in this country, and I see more and more and more, nothing against you, Robert, but I tell you, I see the women stepping forward going, you know what, this is wrong. And they're just shrieking at these people while the guys stand back there like a bunch of drones and don't do anything. It's unbelievable to me, but all this stuff, that song, the women are smarter. Well, I think that's true. I also think the women are stronger because they've just had it. I mean, I'm not patronizing you. I'm not. I believe it. I believe what I'm saying here. I think we know in most families how many times has it been said, Mom was the backbone of the family? How many times has that been said? Many times. Okay, so we're in agreement there.
There is a saying that behind every great man, there is a woman. And my husband does always make the joke. He says, I may be the head of the house, but my wife is the neck.
Yes, the neck. That's good. Let me ask you this. This might hurt your heart a little bit, but and I don't mean to do that, but I do want to ask this question. Did you get the sense that Robert Sr. knew he wasn't going to come back from this thing?
That's a very intimate question.
I know it.
And I believe that Dad, because of who he was, prayed that God would use him in a way that would be for most good, for God's purposes. Whatever that looked like, Dad was willing to accept that. He was laying it all on the altar, whatever that meant or whatever that looked like.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, when Lavoie went up there, he went up there to help the Hammonds.
Yeah.
And he clearly had intentions of returning home. He was only going to be gone for a day. However, when approached to stay, he chose to do so. And as we corresponded the first few days, he knew that, our employment was on the line. He knew that other things were on the line. And he says, Jeanette, come what may. And there was a sense of peace in reference to that. It was okay, because I knew what he was doing. He was a man of principle, and I knew what he was doing was right. And I knew that he was not the man that people were characterizing him to be. He was not a terrorist. He was not a militia member or a leader. He was not a person who was going to go around pointing guns at people or shooting someone. He was not crazy. He was not a supremacist. He was not a racist. He was none of those things in which he was being characterized. So I had peace in reference to, because I knew the man and I knew what he would do when under pressure. I knew he was in communication with God, and I knew he would be directed to do what he needed to do. However, with all of that said, I also knew that he loved life. He lived life to the fullest in every way. He had every intention of returning home. He had plans. We were promoting the book. He was going on the road to promote the book that he wrote 2 years previous. And so he had every intention of returning to his family, whom he loved and who he, above everything other than God, enjoyed spending time with. So for those who feel different, he enjoyed life. And so he had every intention in living it. But being put in that position, I knew my husband well enough to know that he was not going to allow harm to come to the people in that vehicle. So when faced with what he was faced with, he was making decisions, split-second decisions, on what he needed to do and how to keep that young 18-year-old girl, Victoria, safe, and how to keep Shauna safe, and how to keep Ryan safe so he could return to his children, and how to diffuse the situation the best way that he knew how. And I believe that he showed that in the video and in Shauna's video, even in more detail, as he leaps from the car with his hands clearly in the air and running away from the truck to divert the attention away from the truck to keep those occupants safe. I believe that that was totally in his mind. And I believe that he was under a great deal of pressure. And but clearly unarmed with empty hands when he was murdered. But again, I just wanted to, I know that he had a great deal of strength to be able to do that. He knew what was coming immediately at that point. Who would not know that your life was on the line when you're leaping from a vehicle that has already been repetitively shot at multiple locations and as they were traveling? So he knew his life could be ended. And I think at that point he was willing to give it to save the other people in the vehicle.
Which makes your husband and his children's father a real American hero. And I appreciate your answering my, as your daughter said, the an intimate question, because what you've just told us is that this was not some radical man that just decided, I'm grabbing my shooting irons and I'm going in right now and just to heck with it, we're going to do this thing. Rational, didn't go up there with a chip on his shoulder, went up there to help, and the only thing he was armed with really was the Constitution and the law. And then, you know, we had Shauna on the program, and she told us that even after they were out of the vehicle, they kept asking repeatedly, is there anybody else in the vehicle? And it's like, no, there's nobody else. And then they shot the vehicle up a whole bunch more, like a bunch of lunatics. The drone footage clearly shows what if I were the judge sitting up there, I'd go, well, he's putting a throwdown gun right there next to him right now. That's what that is. He's putting a throwdown gun there, and then here comes the phony troll news report that, oh yes, they retrieved a stolen handgun, a 9mm, from his pocket. And you can see the guy putting it in his coat. So thank you for that, because this makes your father and your husband a real hero. A real hero, not just a hero is someone who's willing to do what he did. It's not somebody who just shows up with the attitude and with the uniform on. That's not a hero. A hero is Robert Lavoie Finicum, and that's my piece, and I'm sticking with it because that's what I think. That's what I believe. And golly, take the camera off me, put it back on mom.
I appreciate that. I'm hoping that his example of strength in the face of chaos will help to inspire others to stand. And I know that will take a lot, because as people have witnessed, it could cost you everything, including your life. It may cost you your job. It may cost you your family. It may cost you your freedom. You may be incarcerated. But if we do not, as Tara was alluding to, if the men and women of this country don't start standing and be willing to lose all that materialistic things, your home, your money, your property, if you're not willing to lay it all on the line like our founding fathers did, then we may not come out of this, because they are hoping and counting on the fact that we're frightened little children that are going to run back to security, and that we will shut up and sit down when we see a man murdered, as we have, when we see men and women incarcerated and placed in solitary confinement and treated like animals.
Worse.
Are we going to just shut up and sit down and do nothing for these people? My husband is dead, and we are suffering for that. Yes, our family is without a husband and a father whom we love and adore, but we will see him again someday. We believe that. But what about the families that are suffering now? When is America going to get a backbone and stand up? Stand up, people, and demand that our government step back. And there's so many different issues. It's not just about the ranchers. It's not just about the farmers. It's not just about the miners or the loggers. It's not just about our situation that we find ourselves in. There is so many other things and so many other liberties being encroached upon. that we, in our own spheres, have the ability to stand up and push back.
And I really appreciate you bringing that up, Mom, because we may ask ourselves, how did America get where we are now? And how can we reverse that? And I think that it's important to point out that it is the byproduct of gross negligence. Because if we, the people, do not understand the true principles of liberty, then
The Constitution.
yes, then having anti-liberty policy being put into force is very easy. And that is exactly what has happened. We have had anti-liberty policy passed, and now we are living in tyranny as slaves, taxation without representation. And the way to overcome this is becoming educated, but you cannot just be competent. You have to be virtuous as well to perpetuate freedom.
You know, the negligence is definitely there. So, yeah, they don't understand. It's not about the people who are actually out there doing the hardest work that there is, raising the food, whether it's meat or whether it's grain or hopefully non-GMO grains. The business that your family is involved in is really making convenience for much of the rest of the nation. I mean, what you do and the others out there who the farmers, the ranchers, the people who actually work the land, who produce the one thing other than water that people have to keep going, which is, you know, food. And let's see, shall we work some, you mentioned loggers. Yeah, that designer furniture, if it's not made out of particle board, oh, that's right, particle board is made out of wood too. You know, people do not understand. They think that that the meat that they eat somehow comes into the world already packaged with a label on it. They don't understand that this beef, for example, has to be raised, and it has to be fed, and it has to be kept healthy. I mean, it has to be handled. It's a real job. You don't just sit out there, you know, with your old rifle, you know, and in your rocking chair, just kind of watching it happen so you can collect a check once you take your beef to market. That they don't get that. You know, it is. I'll tell you the thing that I think has caused this. That the question is, how in the world, what has happened in this country where you can watch video of this? I'm just going to put it this way. I'm such a blunt instrument sometimes, but when you can watch what happened to Mr. Finicum happen like that, a man standing out there with his hands up, and it's an insult to dogs to call these guys dogs, and then even after it's over, they're pointing their lasers all over the place. What in the world has happened when we wind up with a police force like this? What is the deal? And keep in mind, there are a lot of cops watching this, and state troopers and everybody else, and they are just as sick over what happened here as we are. Of course, we're not direct family, you know, but I mean, but and I know you're sicker, but Lord knows I know that. But yeah, go ahead. You were going to say something.
I just wanted to say something real quick before my kids chime in. I hope that there's a lot of police that are sickened by this. I have heard from a few that are and have written me personally with their thoughts on this matter. But I've also witnessed and read commentation by other police officers and some who were actually present commenting about how they are safe now and that they can return home to their families and that no harm came to them and that it was their crew was great and everything was fine and let's go have a beer to celebrate. How disgusted I was to hear that conversation and I'm sorry, not to hear it, but to read that conversation online between different members of that squad. I was disgusted. I thought to myself, that was a man. He had a life and he had a family. He was just like you, alive once before you murdered him. and then to go and have the gall to say that you were in any danger whatsoever.
Well, they're
Oh,
cowards.
please, spare me.
No,
You were
they're-
in no danger whatsoever from anybody that was up at the refuge. And secondly, to go celebrate the death of someone by having a beer is totally disgusting. And to watch the video, to watch them kick his hat, to watch how they treated him and didn't treat him or provide any medical assistance or to care whatsoever whether he was still alive laying in that snow. I have been disgusted by some of the actions that I have seen and read. And I'm sorry if I offend any of you good officers who do have a good heart and feel for this situation. But I'm wondering about the ones that don't.
Yeah, well.
How many are there of you?
Well, you know, we've run into a few of those, and the cops and troopers out there, they know who the good ones are and who the bad ones are. And as far as I'm concerned, anybody that would have a conversation like that and post it online is nothing but a damn coward. And that's just how I see it. You got your body armor, and you got your pistol, and you got your M4, and you got your shotgun, you got your mace, you got your cuffs, you got your baton, you got your taser. Can't hang another piece of gear on you. But somehow, you horrible sniveling little weenie, you are somehow in danger. Oh, really? I got an idea. Why don't you pick another career like food service or housekeeping? Okay, I'm not pulling the Finicums into this. These are my words. So swallow them.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
Alas, the scriptures are true. It says, in the last days, the love of man will wax cold. Isn't that what we are seeing?
Yes.
Now, I want to turn to the Constitution. You know, before its development, people suffered what they called absolute despotism. And I looked up what that word despotism means, and it means the exercise of absolute power in a cruel and oppressive way. Our founders were dealing with men who were seeking power. They were dealing with men who sought for the honor of the world. They were dealing with people who stomped on the glory of God and put it in awe. They were dealing with men who were not concerned about the freedom and welfare of our country. Now, when we're dealing with leadership like this, tyranny cannot but help be the byproduct. And that is exactly where we are right now, America, because we have, you know, it is our civic duty, it is our sacred responsibility to study out these people that we vote into office and to not tolerate somebody who will have any type of conduct that is contrary to the principles that are found in our Constitution of the United States. The founders, in organizing the content or the language, were very vigilant that no future leadership could change the way that this document was intended to be. I'll read Amendment 9. It says, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Now, they did not say it can or it will or
it might.
It said it shall not. This amendment, to give a little bit more insight and explanation of it is the underlying purpose, rationale, and function is to secure the ongoing protection of said rights and cannot be changed or repealed to mean anything else. So in other words, if there's any type of legislation or bill or another amendment introduced to Congress that may infringe upon our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, that it should not even be considered. And the reason why we are in the mess that we are in is because we have people in office who do not understand the true principles of liberty, and they are going against the Ninth Amendment by construing and changing the language of this document. Constitution conventions, the con, it's evil.
Well said.
John, I wanted to comment on something that you were talking about, is asking how in the world could we get to a place where our own law enforcement, the people that are here to protect us, basically unjustly killed our father? And, you know, I agree with you. I think that right now there are more good people that wear the uniform than not. And I've known too many cops to believe otherwise. I think we're still in a place where the good outnumbers the bad. However, all it takes is for those good people to do nothing, for us to lose our rights and our freedoms. And I'll admit I'm more disillusioned now by the FBI than I was before. I had known some very upright individuals who were in the FBI even. And I think that there's a place for the FBI. You know, maybe not dealing with a dispute in the West with ranchers, but, you know, maybe back in Chicago dealing with mobs and with the mafia. You know, that's something that's probably more what they should be dealing with. They're very out of their element, and I just can't even believe how it was handled. I mean, whoever oversaw, what did they call them, the hostage rescue team for the hostages that, you know, it was such a peaceful protest. People, reporters, even reporters who disagreed with the protesters fiercely, I mean, they were able to hold peaceful conversations, and there was no pointing guns at anybody until our dad was killed. And I just can't believe what some people with authority in the FBI did to try to cover this up. First of all, to kill a man, and then to cover it up and paint a narrative when they realize that they're going to come under scrutiny. And aside from just how crooked it is to kill our father, which that's what hurts us the most. But they try to cover it up with painting this story, breaking precedents and releasing a video, and with all their dash cams and their body cams that had audio, those were completely ignored. And I can understand going through a legal process where you release information according to the guidelines that are set in investigations and have those done by a third party. But that was completely ignored because they realized this is going to be very bad for us. Let's release the one video that we have that somebody's going to be able to see what they want to see. And people that thought that these were militants and dangerous men, if we tell them that he was reaching for a weapon, they'll believe that he was reaching for a weapon. And that's what you saw. I mean, a lot of people just reading these mainstream articles, they're like, oh yeah, looks like he was reaching for a weapon because that's what the FBI said. And what did they say about the eyewitnesses? You know, what did they say about Shauna Cox and Victoria Sharp, who from the get-go told these corroborating accounts? They called them liars. Yeah. They said these people are obviously lying. But then what happens? The Victoria Cox's video comes out, and lo and behold, she was telling the truth the whole time. It was obvious, like we had no doubt from the get-go that it just seemed to make sense. That was absolutely the truth. But America didn't even really see Shauna Cox's video because it was old news. Mm-hmm. The FBI played it very smart. I mean, they released that video breaking their own protocols to paint a narrative, a lie, because they knew it's a psychological term of anchoring. If you paint a story from the beginning and get people to believe that, even if a truth comes out later on that contradicts it, people aren't gonna just have a contradictory opinion and do a 180. They're just gonna sway maybe a little bit from that original truth and say, oh, maybe it wasn't quite as justified as how the FBI said, but it was still mostly justified. And that's what the FBI wanted. But had Shauna Cox's video come out first, I think America would have woken up from the get-go. But, you know, that's what happens. We weren't able to control the narrative. The FBI was able to.
Because
and I'd like to say that...
I'm sorry. We don't have a free press any longer. Our press is controlled. And look at Pete Santilli. He was there on site trying to continue to bring the news to the American public. And where is he right now? Where is he? He is in jail. When has that ever happened in America? Why are we not clamoring about this? We are losing our rights to free speech, our right to peacefully protest, our right to carry a weapon peacefully. We are losing our free press. When are we going to stand up, people?
When the totalitarian initiative is quashed.
What Tell was saying, Franklin D. Roosevelt, he is the only president, if I can remember correctly from my studies, that served 4 terms. It was after his service that they passed the amendment that a president can only serve 2 terms. Now, Franklin D. Roosevelt said, nothing happens by accident. If it happens, you bet it was planned. And Tell illustrated that beautifully in his explanation.
Yeah, and I think it's all been part of their agenda for a very long time. If you keep the people in ignorance, then the better to control them. And what have they done? They've changed our history books. They stopped teaching the Constitution in schools. And so when our dad went up there and he was teaching the Constitution and how our government is overreaching and tyrannical, and people were actually listening and waking up, they weren't happy with that, and so they had to do something about it, and then that's why he was murdered.
Yeah, going
Amen.
back.
And I say now, I boldly say, how many more lives need to be destroyed before America wakes out of the delusion that they're in? How many more of our unalienable rights have to be stripped away from us, of our life, our liberty, and our right to control and use our personal property? How many more lives have to be destroyed before people start waking up and doing the things that they need to do to preserve liberty, not just for themselves, because it's pretty much gone for ourselves, but for our children and our grandchildren? I want to read something about what our dad was doing there, because the Bureau of Land Management is, what it truly is systemized plundering, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And the way that we as a people stop systemized plundering is we have to unite, and we have to do it collectively. And that's what our dad was doing. That's what the Bundys were doing. They were being courageous enough to say, I will no longer perpetuate this systemized plunder. And then when other people who were victims of this systemized plunder would watch them from a distance, and then they would go and learn from them, and then they would gain courage, and then people were starting to draw that firm line in the sand too, saying, I will not perpetuate this systemized plundering. You know, the day that Adrian Sewell signed off the BLM there, that signing ceremony in Utah, we had 9 other ranchers also signing off the BLM. Now, the federal government, these bureaucracies could not see this come to pass, because if they did, they knew that it would ignite an awakening among the people who are being victims to this. And so in Governor Kate Brown's words, she said, we have to squash this. We have to stop it. This type of conduct is intolerable. It was Senator Ron Wyden who said, we've got to stop this virus before it spreads. Now, those types of statements from our leaders is very foretelling of where their loyalties lie. It is not to freedom or the health of our country. It is to feed self-ego and to get praise from the world and to gain monetarily. Those are the type of people that we need not have in our leadership positions.
also I wanted to say, power is a very evil thing when misused, and all of those leaders care more about the continued power that they hold than they did about the individual or their citizens that were in harm. The Hammonds were the reason that they went up there, was to help the Hammonds because they had been unjustly imprisoned for a second time. And those leaders were more concerned about the virus spreading and stopping it immediately than they were concerned about a couple of men serving their last days out in prison. They didn't care about justice. They cared about retaining the power that they had already amassed. And I wanted to bring up something I saw on Facebook yesterday in reference to the BLM selling land in the state of Nevada. I find that, I have not read the article, I've read the headline. So I find that headline to be very curious. Since when does the BLM own land in Nevada to sell it? Where do they get the right to sell that land? That land belongs to the state of Nevada and to the citizens of Nevada. And when the state decides what they want to do with the land, then that's what they should do with the land. And that should be discussed with the people of the state of Nevada.
Well, the better question is who gets the money? Who gets the money?
Pardon?
Who gets the money?
Who gets the money? That'd be very interesting to know who gets the money after the BLM had the right to sell it. They shouldn't even have the right to sell it. It's not theirs to sell. And that was another issue that my husband was focusing on. States' rights. All across the United States, from the East to the Midwest, all of them received their lands back. Each individual state received their lands back. But when it got to the West Coast, the federal government held on to these lands, and now they're turning them into monuments and places, parks, all these different places, the refuge. The land was never given back.
Constitution.
It does go directly against the Constitution.
Because they're only allowed to have the 10 miles squared, and then they buy other land if they need it from the state to use in arsons and ports and forts and other things to help in the defense of our country. And those are the only two pieces of land that they are allowed to own, is the 10 miles square that was granted to them, and then these others that are
fence.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting that, there's so much that we, the people, need to understand. And I'll go back to that. How can we make a difference? We can make a difference by first making a difference within the individual, ourselves. If we take responsibility and start educating ourselves individually about what our rights are, what our liberties are, studying the Constitution, reading some good books that will help explain these principles and these things to us. I know that that's where I am starting. I held on to my husband, and I learned from him. I didn't put the time in myself as he did. That's why he was so articulate. That's why he was so able to teach. He had read so much and studied so much that he was able to teach at a level that we understood. The ones, someone who hadn't done the homework for themselves. There are so many of us like that, but we need to start with ourselves. Start by educating ourselves and understanding what it is that we are losing here. So then we can then be that person within our family unit that will help teach our family what they need to understand and what they need to know, so that they too can be a force for good and helping to turn this around. So I believe that that's where we need to start, is with the individual, with our families. And then once we have that understanding, then we can make and be that force for good and change within our communities at the local level. Get involved. Get involved in the things that you can make a difference in within your own towns, your own cities, within your own counties, within your own state. We have to start speaking up where we are and in the things that matter to our families. In our specific situation, it was ranching. That's what we were doing. And so that's where our stand began. But we are not going to stop there. We're going to continue. until we help bring understanding to many people, and hopefully many people will start standing with us.
Let me ask you this, just anybody can answer this one who wants. Do you think that, first of all, I doubt very seriously if any mainstream media agencies or agents of mainstream media have contacted you for any interviews whatsoever to like kind of hear your side of the story? Would that be a big no?
That would be a big no.
Okay. Well, here's my question. Do you think that perhaps raising awareness among the citizens, everything from the triple meltdown in Japan with the whole Fukushima incident, to the aerosol spraying, to the GMOs, to things that have happened to the Hammonds and the Bundys and now yourselves, do you think that maybe it's going the other way? It seems almost as though the more information that is put out there that says, hey, look, something really kind of like not right is going on. In fact, some stuff that's very wrong is going on. The more information that we put out about these things, it seems like the more the general public withdraws. Do you get that sense or not? Because I would love to be wrong on this one.
I believe that depending on the personality of the individual will determine how they respond to horrific truths. You know, my dad said once when I was talking and counseling with him how I had shared with a certain somebody a certain something that was not pleasant to hear, but it was reality of what was going on, how that individual had responded. And I was expressing to my dad my frustration and my disappointment in how this person had responded to me because I expected something different. And he began to say to me, he said, daughter, you're beginning to recognize where that person is and where their character is. You're beginning to recognize how you're hitting a hot button for that person, and they're not in a position, or they're not refined enough as an individual to be able to address that horrificness up front. Instead, it's just easier for them to remain in their delusion of prosperity and all is well is in Zion. Because I'll tell you, it takes a courageous person who is founded in true principles and a love for God that helps to keep them motivated to keep pressing forward in what can feel like a sinking ship. Now, this love for God, this is something that I'm gaining a new understanding and a new testimony in, because after my father was horrifically murdered and put on all the TV screens for everybody to see and to critique and demonize him, I just felt like my world was crashing down on me, and I was not motivated anymore to press forward in trying to wake up people who are asleep and are so cruel. But then somebody who has great wisdom said to me, we are to be a light. We are not to put our light under a bushel. We are to shine and to show these correct principles so that their blood will not be on our coat. If we have this wisdom, if we have this truth, it is our sacred responsibility to be a light unto the world, even if they choose, for whatever reason, to not hear what we have to say. And I don't know if that answers your question.
I think it does. I think it does. I understand that, I saw a report yesterday that, maybe the day before, that Ammon Bundy, Ryan, to the best of my knowledge, has still got a bullet in him. And yeah. I'm hearing reports that Ammon is like being starved and tortured and tormented in the lockup where he is.
I believe Brian is the one that's still in solitary confinement.
Yeah. Solitary confinement. Enemies of the state. Unbelievable. Your dad was on his way to talk with another sheriff in another county. Can you give us a few details on that? Because all we have to, I'd rather hear it from you if you know, because anything else is going to be third party and, subject to, a little bit of, well, okay, maybe this is straight and maybe it isn't. But where was he headed when they intercepted him?
One thing from the police report that we got, and I want to touch on that just a little bit later, but interviewing some of the officers involved in this report, one officer said, we wanted to stop them from reaching John Day because there were too many, like-minded people. That there was too much support there, so they felt it was important to stop them before they got there. And I just thought that was interesting. Even from the officers, they said that's what they knew. It was part of their mission to make sure they didn't get to John Day.
And another thing in the police report, thanks for bringing that up, Tel, is in our reading through that, they had to move the blockade to make sure that it was in Harney County because Harney County is with the United Nations. And my brother Mitch said, well, what the heck does the United Nations have to do with this context? And that just impresses upon the mind that this is not a conspiracy theory, but a conspiracy fact.
The United Nations, I heard, what I had heard was that the vehicle was intercepted in a spot that was on federal land, but you heard United Nations?
What we heard was in the police report that John Day, the county in John Day, was a UN-free zone. And so they were not allowed to have the blockade in that county because it was a UN-free zone. Therefore, they moved it back to the Harney County, where the United Nations is accepted in. And so I find that curious. You want to
we don't know all the details. That was just in the report of what the officer said, that they couldn't let him get to John Day because that's a UN-free zone. Hard to know exactly what that means.
Yeah, what does that mean and why was that relevant? Why? And I know that they went to John Day because they were invited to speak. They had over 350 to 400 people waiting for them to get there because these people wanted to hear the message about the Constitution and their liberties, the same message that they were teaching the ranchers who were coming in the dark of night to visit with them because they were afraid for their lives. They were afraid to be recognized. They were afraid that they would have repercussions, that more things would happen to them if they were seen at the refuge, learning about how they could stand up for themselves. So it had gone to another county, and they were worried. The officials were worried about it reaching other counties and the virus spreading. But anyways, they had been invited to go speak about the Constitution and about their liberties and their rights as ranchers and farmers in John Day County. The sheriff had been notified. I understand that the sheriff had said it was okay for them to come to their county. I have been told by Shauna and others that they were asked to be dearmed before they came and that they did dearm themselves before they went from their person. And that's because they didn't want them coming into the meeting with guns on their person. And so I know that my husband gave his last interview to John Capel with ABC News. And just after that last picture was taken of him leaning against the building in a cowboy pose that John requested him to make, they laughed about it, he said. And then he went inside and he changed his clothes. And I know that he put on different clothes because we have some of the other attire that was in that very picture that John took. We have that jacket. We have his things, some of his things. We know that he left his guns behind because he was asked to. And we have his holsters and we have things. So we're not sure how it all played out in the end or how those guns got there. But they did go to John Day to speak about freedom and to help the ranchers and farmers learn how they could stand up for themselves and to give them courage and strength and to help them realize that there were other Americans in this country that cared about them and that were willing to stand with them. And my husband was determined not to leave until every rancher had what they needed to have from them. He was wanting to stay until he could help no more, until he needed to come home.
Yeah.
You know, Dad, when I was up there in Oregon and I took my children, they were not in harm's way. And when we were there walking down the hill after the press conference, Dad shared his sacred experience on his confirmation from his higher power, from his God, knowing that what he was doing was pleasing unto his God, which was what motivated his use of agency. And he shared the story of how an eagle flew down and swooped right in front of him, and how at that point he had such peace within himself, knowing that he was doing what God needed him to do. And he used the term, "I'm crossing the Rubicon." And for those who don't know what that idiom means, it is to pass the point of no return, as it refers to Julius Caesar's army crossing the Rubicon River. And this is what my dad likened his adventure in Oregon, crossing the Rubicon. And when we as a people suffer enough despotism, enough tyranny, it forces the people to, if you will, cross this Rubicon. Because when we are being terrorized, our rights are being taken away, we are forced to either do something or just lay down and be walked all over. And my dad had courage, and he had virtue, and he was competent, and he crossed the Rubicon, and he was inspiring others who were being terrorized to do the same, to stand up and honor their property rights.
Mm-hmm. You know, this might be interesting to you all. I've been looking at, as you've been speaking, I've been looking at this UN free zone thing, and there are a number of websites here. A simple search will bring them up for you. This is a UN free zone. United Nations keep out. Utah town goes UN free. High Country News. Status on UN free zone communities from UN Watch. And then there's a little thing like they'll put a box there with some bold print that they do for definition and so forth. And it says, the law, with quotes around it, Kessler refers to, was passed by the Council 1 week earlier on Independence Day. It establishes Laverkin as a UN-free zone and requires that all United Nations supporters affix a sign to their homes and businesses that says, UN work conducted here. Now, going to this thing from Freedom Outpost, it says, and this is rough even reading the titles, so I'm please don't think I'm insensitive, okay? It says, Prelude to Murder. Let's shift back to 2016 and further examine the incidents which occurred around the aforementioned Malheur Reservation protests and all the ancillary events that surrounded it, specifically the murder of Robert Lavoie Finicum. And now we come down to this little section that says UN Hit Squad. Some of the officers involved in the Lavoie Finicum murder were called into the offices of the Oregon State Police on 31 January 2016 for interviews. The author says, I will include the link to the entire document below, but for the purposes of this article, I'm going to include a brief excerpt to illustrate the outright treason spoken by Officer 1. Officer 1 was asked if he had any information as to what kind of support or how many supporters that Ammon Bundy and his friends had in the neighboring city of John Day. The quote below is how he answered, seen on page 111 of the accompanying document. And you can get this, everybody, at freedomoutpost.com. And just do a search. The rest of it is documents show officers who murdered Lavoie Finicum chose United Nations over U.S. Constitution. So that'll get you there. And here's Officer 1's quote. Now get this. I knew going into it that there was a sheriff in Grant County that was supporting the movement or the ideology behind what they were pushing. I knew that there was a large amount of community members in Grant County that supported their beliefs and that had similar constitutional beliefs. And to the point of the Grant County making it clear they are in a UN-free zone. And so that knowledge was known to all of us. So my next question is, what? UN-free zones? When's the last time anybody mentioned anything about a UN? What's all this about UN-free zones? I never heard of such a thing until this moment.
I know, I would like to understand that too. And I find it interesting how the officer is talking about how the people in John Day County believe in the Constitution as if that's something that they shouldn't be doing.
Oh,
I don't know, the way you read it, it made me feel like these were all check marks against them. Since when? Since when in the United States can we not believe in our own Constitution?
You know, the purpose...
Is that being considered radical? I'm sorry, Tara.
No, I'm sorry. It's important. This is really key. This illustrates how Americans do not understand the principles that is in the bedding that liberty lies in. The proper role of law is to support, sustain, protect our unalienable rights, which is life, liberty, and the right to control our personal property. Instead, law has become lawless in that it creates these bureaucracies that systemize plundering.
Mm-hmm.
And the individual matters not anymore. The individual does not matter. And those rights were for the individual, not the collective, for the individual. Mm-hmm. I also wanted to just highlight just a little bit here, talk about how the press and the powers that be like to create the narrative and pit groups of people against each other. And I'm referring to the Indian population. My husband grew up on the Navajo reservation. He served his mission in the Dakotas with the Native Americans there. He has a great love for the American Indians, and he was so worried about the state of their artifacts and how they had not been kept care of, that he made that video out of concern and love and wanted the Paiute Nation to be aware of how the government had mistreated the artifacts. But how was it portrayed in the media? It was completely twisted and turned around for everyone to jump on the bandwagon, to demonize them further and to pit the American Indian against this group of people who were actually trying to stand up for them as well, and for their artifacts and for their heritage being destroyed, and how the media took that and completely twisted that around. And I was impressed that they were able to have one lady come in to verify. She wasn't from the Paiute tribe. She was from a neighboring tribe, and she came over to look at all of the artifacts and document for herself and for the Paiute Nation the actual condition of those artifacts in the care of the people at the refuge. And I was there that day that lady came and made that video with Ryan Bundy. And I'm just fascinated by how they're able to twist every story to their benefit and to continue pitting one group against another, whether it be the Indian nation against the people that were holding the refuge, or if it's white against black, or Hispanic against black, or this group against that group. We are a nation of individuals that come from different backgrounds. And we need to come together to fight for our liberties of this country in which we all belong to. And we shouldn't allow the press or the powers that be continue to separate us and divide us by teaching us to hate each other for our differences. We need to embrace each other and welcome the differences that we bring. And so that's just another one of my many things that I noticed throughout this whole ordeal. We need to learn to love each other and embrace each other and support each other and gaining back what is rightfully what belongs to the people of this nation.
While Dad was up in Oregon, he did an interview with a controversial reporter who kept pushing the idea that if Muslims were there, that the reaction would have been a lot different. And Dad said, he said, I'm quoting him, that freedom is colorblind. Freedom has no color. And that we should all join together and stand together as a nation.
Well, as I said before, he is in fact a hero. I feel for you. I really do. How can we help? Do you need help? What can we do for you?
Well, I do want to clarify some rumors, because that happens when you're in the news.
Oh yeah.
We need the people to understand that our dad was not a militia member. He was not a member of Oath Keepers. He was not a member of PPEN or 3%ers. He was not a militiaman. He also never served in the military. He was simply a God-fearing, virtuous, competent Arizona rancher, father and husband. So those are two rumors that seem to be consistent, and the people need to hear it from the horse's mouth. And we also want to invite everybody to, if you do not have your pocket constitution, you need to get one. The famous quote from Toy Story, if you don't have a partner, get one. I think it's Woody that says that. Get one. We have them available on our website. One Cowboy Stand for Freedom. It's singular, not plural. One Cowboy Stand for Freedom. They're $1 on our website. Totally affordable. You probably can get them elsewhere as well. You need to read this. You need to understand the principles of liberty like the back of your hand. You need to understand the principles of liberty so that you can communicate it in simple language. We also invite everybody to reach out to our political prisoners. Write them letters. Donate to their funds if you can. Participate in fundraising for them. Reach out to your representatives, especially if they're from your state. Because if one of the Bundys who are incarcerated in solitary confinement is from your state and you're calling your representative, I'm pretty sure that's going to put some fire under their seat. Because these men do not deserve to be tortured and put in solitary confinement. They're being denied so many of their constitutional rights. It disgusts me. So we are
innocent. They're innocent until proven guilty. They need to be treated as such.
Amen.
Sorry.
No, amen. And we also want you to visit our website, One Cowboy Stand for Freedom. On there is our petition. There's a button where you can click on to sign our petition for a congressional investigation. Now, I don't know if it will lead to this, but we are preparing as if it might. I've spoken personally with Congressman Jason Chaffetz, who is in charge or oversees congressional investigations, and I just sat there and I sobbed like a little baby because he just alluded to me the reality that it will probably take 7 years before it would even reach his desk. And I understand the process, but it made me cry. So we're gathering signatures. So if you feel so inclined, please go on our website and sign our electronic petition. Also on our website, you will find a button that says, how can I help the Finicum family campaign? And if you have different talents and skills or networks that might be helpful, we invite you to fill out that form, because we are launching a campaign in July. It's the 6-month, I hate to even call it anniversary because that's a positive word, but the 6-month anniversary of our husband and father being assassinated. And we're launching a campaign and moving forward his message of the Constitution in its original intent, proper role of government, and So if you would like to help in any way, you can fill out that form. And we also have my dad. This is the book that he wrote 2 years ago, or almost 3 years ago now. A little closer. Can you see it?
Yeah, Only by
It's called
Blood and Suffering.
What's that?
The title is Only by Blood and Suffering.
Yeah, Regaining of Lost Freedom. And this is a novel. He wrote it. He felt inspired to do so, and he did a fantastic job. And in this story, he teaches the principles of liberty on an emotional level. He is able to grasp the reader's attention, and most people say once they pick it up, they can't put it down. And it teaches the consequences of the individual versus collectivism. And there's no right or wrong answer in this book. There's some pretty controversial things that he writes about in here, and the goal was to get people thinking, and he accomplished that. And so this is my mother's sole source of income right now, is through my dad's hard work and inspiration in writing this novel. And so that is also available on our family website, One Cowboy Stand for Freedom. So we invite you to buy this book, to read it, and then to leave your thoughts, what you thought. We have a Facebook page. It's called Lavoy Finicum. It's an author page where you can leave your review of the book. So that is some action items.
And it's actually, you may think that it's a informational book. It's really a fictional story, kind of an action story that is really engaging, but it gets you thinking is what it does, and helps you recognize, where do I stand on this, and what am I going to do when things get scary. And I also wanted to mention, it's easy for us to lose hope. I'm an optimist by heart, but going through this experience, there were times where it really seemed pretty dark and hopeless. But I know that there are so many good people in this country, and I have actually had hundreds of people personally reach out to me with warmth and compassion and with support. And that has been the overwhelming feeling. I firmly believe that there are more good people in this country than otherwise. And a lot of great things have already happened. It's easy for people to think this is a lost cause. This is something, even if they don't agree with what some government agencies or agents have done, it's easy for them to think there's nothing that can be done about it. I mean, this is a Goliath that's a little bit too big for little David. But it's not the case. I mean, already, the fact that Shauna Cox's video was released to us, I was thinking that there is no way that was going to be released. That the fact that they really did have a third-party investigation do some things right, apparently, and helping us get that truth out really exceeded my expectations. And I think that there's still a lot of hope in the future. So I just don't want, with all of this depressing, hopeless stuff that we see because of this experience, to think that that's our only trajectory. There's really a lot of good things that have happened and that can continue to happen. And even if it's just a little thing that any of us could do, no matter how small, if we can do something, it's a step in the right direction. And collectively, we can really change things and turn it around.
That's beautiful.
Many hands make light work. And we all have a part and a role that we can play in helping to bring back the Constitution and push back the federal government into their rightful position. I too want to echo what Tel had to say so eloquently. I have received so many letters and cards, thousands of correspondence from thousands of people across this country and even out of country. People are watching this from everywhere, and people are aware, and people are kind and thoughtful and generous and compassionate and so loving towards our family. And I know they are with the Bundys, because I've heard the same thing. And all the people who are incarcerated, I know that everyone is praying for all of the different people who are in jail right now. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank everyone who has done so in communicating with us. It has given us that hope that we as a family who have suffered this great loss of Lavoy, it has given us hope to move forward and to have the courage and the strength that my husband pleaded with us to have. He said to me as I was leaving, he says, Jeanette, he says, take courage, have faith, God is in charge. He believed that, and I believe that. And I believe that the American people are a kind and generous people, and we're a strong people. And we have a great deal of work to do, and we can pull together to accomplish that. And I have that hope, and I am grateful for where we live. And I'm grateful for this country and for what it has brought into my life. And I'm grateful for all of you that have helped us in so many different ways. And I thank you so very much from the bottom of my heart.
We thank you very much. Go ahead.
Tel has one more action item.
Yeah, you were also asking, what people could do if there's anybody that would like to support in a memorial run. It's kind of a spirit run or virtual run or walk that people or even ride on horseback, however people want to do it. It's just something that people can do from their own communities on their own in their own time. You can see through our website, there's a link to sign up for this memorial run, and what you get out of it is a belt buckle, and what you can either support the Finicum family or the Bundy family, and there are custom-made belt buckles with the respective brands. Really, it's a fundraiser is what it is, and it's to help with the legal fees for this fight. But just something that people can have that belt buckle and be able to get some time outside thinking about the cause and about what has happened.
And I guess I'll just close with my closing thoughts. I want everyone who can hear the sound of my voice to understand that I'm petitioning my Maker, that I might be granted the courage, the wisdom, the fortitude, and the humility to move forward in a powerful way. And I invite everyone to join me in doing that. Because if we don't have these things, we will become victims. We will become tyrants ourselves in seeking to be leaders, because that is the natural man tendency when a man is not motivated by his love for God. We need this wisdom, and we need courage, we need fortitude and humility. And that is what I'm doing, and I invite everybody to join me. And I too have hope in this nation. I too know that there are great, virtuous people out there, and I invite those people to decide to start acting a little bit more, to get involved a little bit more, to not just be virtuous, but to be a doer of the word. And that is what we need. And I'm going to end by saying, in the scriptures, talks about how in the last days that the women and children will be crying, "Where are you, men of God?" And I can say that is my cry, because my man of God, my father, he's now in the next life. I think I can speak for my mother in saying that that is her yearning. Where are you, men of God, that will step up to this mantle, to this holy sacred honor that we have to maintain our liberty? I think that I can assume that this is Ammon's wife and their children's cry, and Ryan's wife and children's cry, and I could go on with all of these wrongfully incarcerated prisoners. Where are you, men of God? Please step up to the mantle. Be the men that you are, not just in virtue, but in your actions. Get involved. Make the difference that you can, because you can.
May God bless you all. And let's stay in touch. Thank you so much for sharing of yourselves this way. And please accept the condolences from many thousands of people for the loss of Robert, who, even though he's not with us now in this physical world, may have gained the right kind of power. Yep. That's what it's about, folks. It's about the families, it's about the children, it's about the wives and the daughters and the sons. That's what it's about. When I hear a child cry out like that, that's what we're doing this for. It's not just all about us. It's about who comes behind us as well.
Thank you, John.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you for having us. We so appreciate you having us on your show. Thank you. Thank you
for being here. And just know, I just signed your petition, and that's ONE, One Cowboy, Stand for Freedom. Do not put a number in there. Spell the word ONE. There's a petition there to push for a congressional investigation, and we should have one. It's the law, and they who administer the law have now broken it, and they should be brought to justice. We'll talk again soon, Finicums. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye.
That's it.
Bye-bye.
And it may cost you everything, but that's okay. I want to kind of end a little bit with a story. Christmas morning, Christmas Eve, there was a gentleman that I have great respect for called George Washington. He crossed the Delaware with his soldiers, and he took on the Hessians, the British Hessians, and he lost not one soldier to the armed conflict. There was 150 that were wounded. But he did lose two that died before they even got there. 2 men froze to death before they arrived there. And the bloody foot tracks could be traced in the snow. Now, why is my life more valuable than their life? They gave their all, didn't even get a chance to fire their musket. They died frozen. I'm sure they had loved ones, mothers, fathers, probably children that their dreams were cut off, but they gave their all for this freedom. Why do we reap the fruits and the rewards of their sacrifices, and then when it comes down to this time that we don't stand up? Will you be able to hold your head up? Will I be able to hold my head up when we meet together? If I don't stand, I can't. They gave everything, and so many people have given everything. It's time to stand. I want anybody that hears this, please pull your courage to the sticking point. Strengthen your resolve, stiffen your back. Let's stand. It may cost you your life. That's okay. Just like I said to that cowboy, we all die. Die for something good. Let your children, your posterity know where you stood, where you stand. Don't disappoint your ancestors. This is the day, the time.